What is exposure? You're probably thinking the thing I'm doing right now. And exposure can mean lots of things. But since on this channel I'm focusing on art in general, and in this series specifically on photography, today we're gonna talk about exposure in photography. How does it work? Why the we have some weird maths behind it? What is exposure in photography? Why it's so goddamn important? It's actually one of the basics of photography. But if you like content like this and you want to learn about photography and other things in visual arts, subscribe to this goddamn channel. And yeah, let's dive into another episode of So first things first, we gotta know the basic definition of what the fuck is exposure. So exposure is, you can say, just illumination of your camera matrix or your film. And to determine this, we use something called light meters. And light meter is basically built into every single device. There are also devices that are light meters. It usually looks like a black box with a ping pong ball attached to it, and it helps to determine your exposure. And in your camera, it will just usually look like this. We will have this kind of like a scale, right? And usually there's this little thing that shows you if your exposure is proper or not. And you should aim for 0, all right? So photography is just like your life. It's totally perfect at 0. So this is the most important thing basically, because in photography, we don't paint with paint, we paint with light, you can say. So maybe let's go for a little simpler definition of exposure. So basically, if you go and take a photo, there's a certain amount of light. All right, it can be from a lamp, it can be from the sun. So this light travels through your camera, and here we have our lens, right? But the lens itself, besides a bunch of lenses, i.e. glasses, we also have aperture in there. And that's one of the things that cuts off light that comes in, because we have a bunch of it here, then lots of it actually goes through your glasses. Obviously it gets like reflected and shit, so let's do reflecting, right? And we have certain amount of light entering, and you can close up the aperture to let just a little less light in. Okay, another segment that can change the amount of light that reaches your matrix is shutter speed. So there you have a shutter. Shutter, basically, this is like a box that just travels from one side to the other, exposing your film. And if your time is faster, then your sensor or film will be exposed less, because it will just go fast. And that can cut off your light again. So because of the shutter speed, the actual sensor or film will get even less light on it. And that is basically exposure. And as you already noticed, we can adjust said exposure with aperture and shutter speed. We also have one more little thing that can change that, and that is in the sensor itself. And that's called ISO, right? So in case of the film, you can buy 100, 400 and different types of ISO. And on digital, you can just change it on the fly. So that also changes said exposure. But for now, chill the fuck out. For now, let's stick with the lowest ISO. Lower ISO, the better for learning how the shit works. It has least amount of grain, so you won't fuck up your pictures right away. And this thing, of course, it has some smart ass name, and it almost sounds like science, because it's called Bunsen-Roscoe law. I'm probably butchering this, but I don't care. And this specific thing is one of the most fundamental laws of photochemistry. Wait, photochemistry? Okay. So that means it actually is a science. But this law was discovered in 1862, and it stands that the amount of chemical charge produced is proportional to the amount of light absorbed. So, in simplified way, if you're developing your photo in a darkroom, you put it in some chemicals and you see image appearing. But image is appearing because of the chemical reaction. We're gonna have that all in later episodes of photo techniques, so stay tuned for this shit. But basically, parts of the image that needs to get darkened, it's just silver changing its form. And that is using the chemical that is in the water, right? So the more you develop, the less chemical to water in proportions you will have. So if your picture is overexposed, i.e. too dark, then it will use even more chemical. Same thing happens when you expose the film. Image gets exposed. Of course, on film it will be inverted because it's in a negative. The more chemical this certain photo will take from the process of developing films, which we do in those fun boxes. But it also stands for pairs. And this will be more translated into your digital cameras and stuff. So basically, let's say we have aperture 4 and shutter speed at 125. And this will give us certain amount of light, certain exposure. But then we can change both of these values based off of what we need. So let's say we want more details, because smaller the hole, the more of the detail you're gonna get, which we covered in a previous goddamn episode. So I'm switching my aperture to 5.6, but the picture will get darker if I will still keep the same shutter speed. So what I need to do is to adjust the shutter speed as well. So I will go half that, so I will go for 160. All right. Now, both of these will have exactly the same exposure, just different levels of sharpness. And I can do that even lower, so I can go for aperture 8 and even 130, but this will require tripod in order to have the same exposure, because the picture will be blurry. And we can, go like this, basically, till we run out of time. Or apertures. Of course, you can go the other way around. Who am I to judge? You do you. I don't really care. But right now, you might not understand this. But bear with me. We will get to that point soon. So you will see that and it will be like, that's perfectly understandable now. If you're not there yet, don't worry though. We're going there. So let's go back a little bit to this little thing. You can also adjust that pre-photo. If you're adjusting this pre-photo, it will usually say EV. And you might think, what the fuck is this? It's that electric vehicle? Does my camera ride? Of course you didn't thought that. You aren't that stupid, are you? But that basically means exposure value. And usually you can set it to like from minus something to plus something. This will be overexposing it, and this will be underexposing it. And technical definition of perfect EV, so 1 EV equals perfectly exposed scene with aperture 2 and shutter speed of 2 seconds. But that's just fucking too much, right? So let's not focus on this. I'm just giving you the whole information. I'm not hiding anything from you. But some things you don't need to understand perfectly. So we can say that this defines how much light is in the place of measurement. The same thing that the light meter does. And of course we can change that by changing our aperture or shutter speed without need to change the exposure value pre-shot, especially if you don't know what you're doing. So let's go. We already covered this shit, but don't worry, we're gonna go back again. So 1F stop, which is basically if you go from like 5.6 to 8, it will be 1 full stop. If you go from shutter speed, also get the same thing. So if you go up or down from 60, let's say, down to 30, it will also be 1 full stop. One will be plus and one will be minus. And it's the other way around that you think. So this is actually plus because it gets the exposure brighter. And this will actually be the minus because it makes it darker. And all of these, both this and this, equals exactly 50% of light. But what the fuck does it mean? It means if you have 100% light at your lowest aperture, so let's go from the disappearing example to, and let's go for shutter speed as well, 2 seconds. This, let's say, this will be our 100 in that example. So anytime we change any of these, So we go to 4, but we leave 2 seconds. Then we will have 50% of light. All right. And I know sometimes the math won't be mathing, especially if you're trying to go from like, you will establish like F8 and 160 will be your 100% light. And if to go darker or brighter from that, because you can do that, just remember that one stop equals one full aperture or shutter speed. Changing the shutter speed, double that or shorten that by half. So again, 50%. That also works for ISO. Bring. Which brings me to what the fuck is ISO. So this, besides being some fucking international standard, I guess, it's also sensitivity of your film or again, matrix or sensor. And let's start with films. We have stuff that's lower than 50 ISO, and those are special low sensitivity films. Then we go to normal, so 100 to 400 is universal sensitivity. So this is the best one to learn, and I recommend grabbing the lowest one like 100 or 200. Then we have things that are higher than 800 ISO, and this will be high sensitivity. But on digital, you can change them on the fly. And guess what? Each ISO is exactly 50% light. So we can apply that to our rule here. So if I have 100 ISO, this will be my 100% of light. But if I go up with ISO, I will get 150%. See, this is the instance that math don't mathin', but trust the process, it works like this. Because besides that, we also have the shutter speed and aperture and all of that crap. So it will cut the significant portion of this 100%. If you have something to add to what I'm saying, leave a comment, leave a like, or maybe a suggestion for future vids. So now, once you understand that we have all three, this should kind of make sense now, right? So if you cannot change, let's say this one was perfect because you can shoot it from the hand, it has some detail, but it has some nice bokeh as well, but it's still a little bit too dark. But thankfully, you are shooting at 100 ISO. That gives you an option to go up to 200 ISO and make it a little bit brighter, therefore perfect for your occasion. Of course, I don't recommend jumping with high ISOs. I know that mirrorless cameras nowadays, they are really fucking good with this shit, like especially working with no light. They're really good at that. But I would still recommend sticking with the lowest ISO you can. If you cannot get out of the situation with a lamp or a tripod, then yes, of course, this will be one of the things to change, but I would recommend doing ISO change last. But before we finish up, I like nerd shit, so I'm just gonna do some nerd shit at the end as well. So if you buy older cameras, they will sometimes have ASA or DIN. And these are different types of ISO. Those were different standards. One was commie and one was capitalistic. But it was confusing because if you got camera in the other country, sometimes you couldn't like read, or you had this annoying fucking table with changings. I hated this shit because ASA, it is like ISO, but DIN be wilding, dude. Thankfully, photographers were like, yo, we're already doing this math on the fucking fly. We don't need to do math on this shit. So they decided to standardize it as in ISO, standard that we know today. And that happened in 1974. So if you look at another date from today's video, which was 1862, you can clearly see that it took us 100 years to get the ISO, and be thankful for that because it's a really good system, and it's easy to calculate this and use the Bunsen-Roscoe law or whatever the fuck they called. And remember, deep down, photography is just like fan fiction. You just have bunch of pairs that you have to be shipping with each other in order to get proper exposure. Unless you're fancy little prick or work for the TV, then you will use special light meters with the ping pong ball thing measuring perfectly each tiny little amount of light that can be anywhere. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you understood at least part of the shit I was saying. And I hope that you'll stay around for another episode. If you enjoyed, subscribe. If it was the first video you saw on the series, come check out the whole fucking playlist. And yeah, fuck off. Go test the knowledge and shit.